As we're leaving the plane, Sergeant John was offering up some suggestions for better coverage of our men and women in uniform when an elderly man about 10 yards in front of us falls flat on his face. I later learned he just had chemotherapy. His head and his hands severely bruised and bleeding. Immediately, Sergeant John called to Sergeant Brad and Major Mike and instructed them to stay with the fallen man while he ran for help. Sergeant Brad, on his crutches, ran down the gateway. It was as if they had trained for this mission, too, to help anyone in need.
Yeah, so, in May of 2000, Memorial Day of 2005, three of my teammates got killed in Iraq. So we were going to three separate funerals. First one was to Derek's, my team leader in California, Lompoc, California. We went out there, did the funeral. As on the way back, we're in the airport at Santa Maria, and I'd been drinking and a little drunk, ain't gonna lie, and pretty emotional. And I hear somebody talking on the phone, and I recognize the voice. I'm like, I know that voice from somewhere. I'm starting looking around, and he's a little guy, man. He's like 5'6", 5'7", about 85 pounds, little small guy. And he had like a white T-shirt on. And I looked over, and sure as it is, it's Dan Abrams. And, I've been seeing all the reporting, how bad they're talking about the military because the war was going on pretty heavy at that time. So I go over to him, and he's on the phone. And I'm like staring at him. I'm like, hey, get off the phone. And he's looking at me. He's like, what? He's like, hold on a second. I said, yeah, get off the phone. I want to talk to you. And he's like, let me call you back. And I start going in on him. Like, hey, man, I said, I think it's pretty messed up. I was cursing a little bit. I think it's pretty messed up that the kind of reporting you guys are doing. It's like you're reporting all this bad stuff. I said, you don't report anything good what we're doing, this and that. And I'm getting pretty heated. And to Dan's credit, he kept his composure because he probably thought I was going to hit him or something, which he probably wasn't wrong. Well, my boss, who's a major, Mike Flatten, he comes over and he's like, JB. And he's like, calm down, man. He's like, come on. I said, no, we're good, right, Dan? I said, we're good, right? And he was like, yeah. I said, we're good. I said, I'm just talking, man. And so we start talking a little bit, and he asked me what's going on. So I told him about Derek and Casey and Jeremy and what we were doing. And he was like, okay. He's like, hey, he gives me his card. He's like, hey, call my producer on Monday, and I want to do something for your friends. I'm like, yeah, okay, I appreciate it. I thought he was blowing smoke, whatever. So we get on the plane. We fly back to L.A. As we're getting off the plane in L.A., there's an old guy as we're departing, probably 60s, 70s. He's early 70s, old guy. He didn't look healthy at all. He looked sick. And him and his wife, and he's walking. He fell like right in front of me. He stumbled. He fell face first, busted his head and his nose and his lip. And people just walked right around him. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, and of course, immediately go try to help the guy. I told Major Flatten and can't think. I'm losing my train. What's his Brad Riley. Sorry, Brad Riley, who was on crutches because he got shot in Afghanistan. So he's got shot through the foot. So he's on crutches. I said, hey, man, you guys stay with him. I took all our stuff, we got our clothing bags, gave it to Dan Abrams. So he's standing there with all our stuff like a Sherpa. So I ran down the gateway and trying to find some help for this guy. And I find no one wants to help this dude. I can't find anybody in the airport to help him. We get a wheelchair. We get him to the bathroom. We're trying to clean his face up and all this stuff. Then finally paramedics show up, and Dan's following us around with all our stuff. And he was just like, hey, he's like, I'm serious. Just call me on Monday, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, whatever. And I come to work on Monday, and his producer had already emailed me. She was like, hey, I'm so-and-so with the Abrams show. I want to do X, Y, Z. He's like, I need some information. I sent her all the information I had on what happened, who Jeremy, Derek, and everybody were. And he ended up doing a segment on his show at the end of his show. It was about a minute long or so. And he did a fantastic job. He represented them well, and it meant a lot to the families, too. And he made copies, CD copies, and he mailed them to us. He mailed them to me, and then I gave them to the families. And it was nice to see finally somebody recognize the sacrifice people are making, that it's real. It's not just something you see on TV. He got to experience it firsthand of the pain that comes along with it, because those people, they don't understand that. They don't care. They really don't care. But I give him credit, because he is not a conservative person by any means. but he did the right thing, and he did a good job of it. Production crew and everything. So I'll give him hats up. Once in a while, I'll email him, and you got to pay to email him too, by the way. And I'll send it. Yeah, it's like, well, it's weird. And I say, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but you did something good for my friends. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And it was a good thing he did, and it meant a lot to the families.
My closing argument, a story about my time in Santa Maria, California that has nothing to do with Michael Jackson. I was flying out of Santa Maria for the weekend and was approached in the airport by a guy named John who said he was a fan of the show. He was with what I assumed were two friends, one on crutches. They just looked like three guys on vacation. I quickly learned that their trip to the area was anything but. They were in town for the funeral of a colleague, one of their, quote, teammates, Captain Derek M. Argel of Lampa, California, who along with three others died in a plane crash on Memorial Day in Iraq. Captain Argel, 28, was survived by his wife Wendy and 11-month-old son Logan. Argel was the first of three funerals they would be traveling to attend. Also that of Captain Jeremy Frescus of Farmington, New Mexico, and Sergeant Casey Crate of Spanaway, Washington, all members of the 23rd Special Tactics Squadron out of Hurlburt Field, Florida, an elite Air Force unit that has, among other things, been helping to locate bombing targets in Iraq and Afghanistan. So here I am, consumed with the minutia of a celebrity trial in California, while these guys are doing the nation's work. I was almost ashamed that Sergeant John, they've asked me to only use their first names, had walked up to me to tell me how much he liked my work, rather than me walking up to him. But that's just the beginning. I learned that the one on crutches, Sergeant Brad, I'll call him, was recovering from a gunshot wound he received in April in Afghanistan. His team had been called in to support an ambushed coalition convoy. He apparently killed a number of enemy fighters and performed life-saving treatment on another wounded soldier after he was hit with a round from an AK-47. Okay, so now I'm thinking about the relative insignificance of my life on my short flight from Santa Maria to LA. As we're leaving the plane, Sergeant John was offering up some suggestions for better coverage of our men and women in uniform when an elderly man about 10 yards in front of us falls flat on his face. I later learned he just had chemotherapy. His head and his hands severely bruised and bleeding. Immediately, Sergeant John called to Sergeant Brad and Major Mike and instructed them to stay with the fallen man while he ran for help. Sergeant Brad, on his crutches, ran down the gateway. It was as if they had trained for this mission, too, to help anyone in need. They called for first aid. There was none. They did what they could, eventually got a wheelchair and took him to the men's room, helped him clean up. About 30 minutes later, a medic arrived and all was well. These guys are heroes on the battlefield, but they're also living heroic lives, making sure their fallen comrades are remembered properly, and while they're there, helping out anyone else in need. Sergeant John, Sergeant Brad, and Major Mike, I salute you guys. Coming up, your emails on the Jackson jurors.
And he actually made it better than it. He made it sound a lot more positive on my end than it was, because I came across very aggressive with him, and he handled it with a lot of grace, and I'll give him credit for that as well.
I appreciate you coming on and opening up and giving people a real look into what life was like and what your life was like. If you got something out of this, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this, guys, because conversations like this matter. And hey, listen, man, thank you so much again for coming on. It's been a long time in the making. It was great catching up with you. And we'll see you next time on Rodney Hood Talks. You guys, remember, God loves you, and so do we. Peace.